How do you automate shipping across your marketplaces, Amazon, and the website? One of my favorite solutions is joining our podcast today to talk about ShipStation. My name is Stephen Pope, and this is the My Amazon Guy podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Alpha Raven House. If you want to triple your daily sales by ranking your product to the top page of one at 10% of the usual costs, getting verified reviews along the way, they're your solution. Check them out at alpharavenhouse.com. All right, I'm now joined by Cody DeArmond. I'm butchering your name. I'm so sorry. Cody, how do you say your last name?
I like it your way. You made me sound much fancier than I actually am. Cody DeArmond. Thanks so much for having me.
I should have practiced that 3 more times before bringing you on. Thanks for your spirit on that, Cody. So, Cody, you're the sales director at ShipStation, and as I understand it, you were one of the first 20 employees at ShipStation, and now the rest is history.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. They brought me on when there was, 20, 25 or so of us. We were working out of a house here in Austin, Texas. Things have gone well since then, and it's been a pleasure to be along for the ride.
Well, cool. I appreciate you joining me today. So, as I understand it, since COVID, ShipStation's been busier than ever. Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah, spot on there. Certainly not to profiteer off of all of this, but this has definitely drastically accelerated the shift to e-commerce that we've seen. Specific to Amazon, we've been working with a ton of merchants who, frankly, have found themselves in a bit of a bind as it comes to FBA and getting their orders out the door. So interesting challenge to solve. Been fortunate to be able to help a lot of them out, but we've seen a ton of merchants that are looking for solutions to get their orders out the door quickly, especially if they were used to relying on FBA to handle all of that for them. So it's been really interesting to have these conversations over the last couple of months. A lot of merchants who were used to having that outsourced are kind of learning on the fly to get orders out the door. It's been pretty commonplace for us to have merchants call us up and say, "Hey, I've got 1,000 orders that I need to get out the door yesterday.
Wow.
What do I do?"
1,000, geez Louise. And you're like, well, good luck. I've got a solution, but man, 1,000 orders, you're going to be staying late tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
So Amazon is kind of back to normal. It's not quite. I am in the weeds myself because I side hustle my own brand just to keep my skills sharp. And I use ShipStation. I'm also a relatively new adopter of your platform, and quite frankly, it was so easy. I figured it out in a single day. Props to you guys. And I'm fully automated with Etsy, Walmart, eBay, and side orders right now. And I think that's where everyone who's listening to this call wants to be. Couple of talking points before we talk about like how you guys actually automate. What's been the talking points? What have consumers been saying to you? With, even now, today's May 28th, when we're shooting this podcast, there's still kind of a little bit of delays on FBA shipping. Is that still kind of impacting your base?
Yeah, so we've had a really interesting perspective on FBA because we were one of the first platforms like ours to actually integrate with FBA to where, as you mentioned, you can take multi-channel orders and still have them routed through. So because of that, we probably have a disproportionate amount of merchants that we work with that do rely on FBA for orders beyond just, Amazon. And so we have had merchants, of course, earlier on in COVID, reaching out saying like, "Hey, my goods are non-essential. I just heard from Amazon that they're not going to be accepting these from me for the foreseeable future. What do I do?" Then it's been pretty commonplace for us to have those merchants who maybe for the first time had to bring 100% of their fulfillment in-house. I think for a lot of them, it probably seemed much scarier than it actually was. And once they got a tool like ours in place and kind of got their feet under them, maybe they realized like, "Hey, I can actually probably handle a little bit more of this than I thought, and maybe it's going to be a little bit more profitable for me that way." And then, just like you mentioned, the merchants that are selling elsewhere, or maybe their goods aren't essential, even though they're back to where they can still ship their goods to FBA now, and maybe they can get back to starting to rely on them. It's not at the level of turnaround that their customers historically expected from them. And so, even though everybody knows things are a little bit different right now, that still doesn't necessarily mean that your consumer is going to be really excited about, waiting 2-3 weeks to get their shipment. So that's kind of the thin line that we see a lot of the merchants that we work with walking right now. trying to manage, oftentimes more orders than ever because of the current environment, but then also trying to keep that turnaround time down. And so that's what we've had probably the bulk of our conversation centering around.
Makes sense. And I still have a couple of orders that are 2 weeks old sitting in my FBA queue, and ShipStation is tracking everything. And the moment the tracking becomes available, ShipStation takes that tracking and puts it right into those platforms like Etsy. So I've been very impressed with the platform. I've shot a couple of videos on YouTube where I set up tutorials on how to automate. So let's talk about automation. Obviously, automation saves time and money. Tell me more.
Perfect lead in there. Yeah. So, I mean, what we most frequently find is it's not rocket science, right? But it's that someone starts a business and they get a couple of orders and they're like, okay, I'm going to go to the post office or print one label at a time. And that works for a little bit. And then things slowly build. And then 6 months from now, it's, like what we were describing, all of a sudden they look up and like, one day they realize, hey, I'm 6 months in. I've got way more orders than I started with. And, now that I think about it, I'm spending a few hours each day copying and pasting or going back to the post office, worse yet. So obviously, with, I would say probably 15 minutes or so of setup, you should be able to cut all of that out, no problem. But then the other one I'd say that's probably a little less obvious is the merchants that are maybe occasionally making a mistake on how they ship it out, shipping with maybe a more expensive service than they need to, maybe occasionally having, a picking error where they've got the actual wrong item going out. Those are maybe the more hidden costs that we see merchants eliminating as well. So definitely saving time by not, clicking the same thing over and over or printing one label at a time, but then also just mistake proofing your business so that it's not just relying on you doing the right thing every time, and you're really reducing those accidental overspends.
So you've got some people who are wondering, how do I get started? So what's step one?
Yeah, sure. Of course, ShipStation.com. There's going to be a link at the top to try it free. That's a really easy way to get going. Just takes an email address. But aside from there, as soon as you log in, you're going to be prompted to connect your channels, right? So we integrate with more than anybody else in our space. That's kind of how we got our start and got our traction in this area. But on average, it's going to take you about 2 minutes or so to plug in your channel where you're actually taking
that
orders
is not an overestimation, by the way, guys. I found that to be true. It's really as simple as Cody's making it out to sound like. So easy channel integration. You click a couple buttons, they're connected. So that's step one. What's step two? Maybe is it just automatically automated, or is there a couple more things to get done?
Yeah, sure. So as far as the channel goes, that's really the biggest thing that you have to do when it comes to terms of setup. You'll have a similar kind of prompt when it comes to how you want to ship. We have merchants on both ends. So we'll have some that come to us specifically to take advantage of our kind of in-house carrier options that are discounted. We'll have others that may be power sellers that have had their own, account with the carrier for years, and they want to use those negotiated rates instead. Either way works. You just plug it in. Go ahead.
And then you also have the multi-channel fulfillment guys like me, shipping out of Amazon FBA. And so to do that, you just set up a carrier in the account and then select that as your option, and go from there. So yeah, that makes sense. And then store syncing, how easy is it to get that done?
Yeah, sure. So essentially as easy as once the customer checks out, that order data can import into ShipStation. I would say you don't have to do it this way, but a lot of the merchants, especially multi-channel merchants that I work with, once they've done the setup that we just talked through, takes 5 minutes or so, they're essentially treating ShipStation as their e-commerce home base oftentimes, because you'll have all of your orders in one view. So as far as that goes, it's automated. There's a one-click import, so orders automatically show up. You don't have to jump back and forth. You don't have to copy and paste addresses, no manual entry or anything like that. Customer places an order, you're going to see that info in ShipStation.
One of the coolest things that I was surprised by when I went through my ShipStation setup is the reporting and the dashboard. I wasn't expecting this, and I didn't realize how much I value it, because now that, if you're selling on so many different platforms and you want to get like one report, there's many tools out there that can yeah, sure, you got $500 here on eBay today, 200 on Etsy, and 100 on Walmart or whatever. But that's kind of part of your core service. You're pulling in that info anyway, so you don't need another tool to do that. So that was kind of a cursory find that I was surprised by.
Yeah, spot on. I would say not that many people maybe sign up for us because that's what they're looking for. And it's kind of like you mentioned, pleasantly surprised because you do have one consolidated view of all of your channels. Specifically on our side, and this is a nerdy thing to get excited about, but the one that I always point to that I think is especially cool is our shipping cost breakdown. So it's going to give you a real time across all of your channels comparison of what your customer is paying you for shipping versus what you actually paid the carrier. So in real
That's
time,
incredible.
yeah, in real time, you're getting a net value on either, how much you're out of pocket, this day, week, month on your shipping costs, or maybe it's the inverse. Maybe it's actually a bit of a profit center for you. You get all of that in, one very straightforward, easy to read report.
So one question people might be asking is, so do you actually fulfill my item? Do you touch my item? Are you physically shipping it?
Oh yeah, we get that one. We get that one a lot. So no, I don't think you would want me driving your delivery truck or packing up your boxes. We're here in Austin, Texas, and we're pretty good at software, but we don't physically touch goods. And now, believe it or not, we actually do have a number of 3PL partners that actually run their entire warehouse operation off of a ShipStation account. So if it's someone that is looking for a provider at that point, obviously we're pretty well connected in this space. So we do have a network of providers that we may refer people into, but no, we're here to hopefully make people's lives easier by bringing all of these providers into one place, and then kind of taking all the thought out of it so that the right thing happens every time.
Cool beans. I think it's a great software tool that you have, and it's definitely made my life easier. I used to, what I did before is I manually keyed them in, and multi-channel fulfillment, manually keying into Amazon's FBA system, prone to error and 6 or 7 minutes per order. And now I literally don't even click a button. It just automatically happens. It's like magic. So
Yeah, that's the end goal that we're trying to get everyone to. We set it up with the business rules that are right for you. A lot of merchants will base their shipping decisions on a lot of different criteria, but we help you build that in. Pretty straightforward. If this, then that logic. You don't have to be a developer or no code or anything like that. And with 10, 15 minutes of setup, you've got this really powerful system that a Fortune 500 company might use to run their fulfillment operation to power your business.
And you guys are integrated with a lot of different site infrastructures. My favorite, Shopify, but I noticed that you guys are integrated with many others. You want to just kind of shoot off 4 or 5 of the website softwares you guys are integrated with?
Yeah, interestingly enough, that's kind of the genesis of ShipStation. Prior to ShipStation proper, we were actually Octane, which at the time was the highest rated shipping app for eBay power sellers. And a lot of those customers came to us and said, like, hey, this is great, but I'm starting to sell in more and more places. Of course, this was back 2009, 2010,
Sure.
and the light bulb kind of went off. We had these brilliant developer founders. They said, hey, we can write integrations. So they started coding to Magento, WooCommerce, Shopify. All of the major players. And at this point, we have north of, I believe, 150 integrations. So at this point, just about anywhere you sell online and however you want to ship stuff out, we should be able to integrate to it. But yeah, as you touched on, the obvious popular integrations for us, or maybe a typical stack that a merchant may be running with ShipStation would be, selling on Amazon, Walmart, eBay. They're listing on all the different marketplaces, but then maybe they also manage a handful of their own brands and sites that they run off of Shopify or WooCommerce or Magento.
So we've hit home on automation. So I'm going to switch subjects next. So since you've been with ShipStation and seen it kind of evolve, this is kind of a curiosity question. What was the most interesting development in your opinion? You mentioned going from eBay to multiple channels. I'm sure you'll probably answer with that. And then what were the biggest challenges that you guys had to overcome?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Obviously, prioritizing the integrations was an interesting one because, of course, everybody wants you to connect to everything, and they, of course, all think their channel's the most important one, of course. So being strategic about which ones could help the largest number of merchants, most quickly. That's always an interesting puzzle to solve as well. But then as we got into that, we started to hear from merchants that, kind of like I touched on, they started more and more to treat ShipStation as their home base. And so it's interesting to see kind of what the next step was, aside from just generating labels, how else can we help merchants, since this is increasingly becoming their home base. And so that evolved into, integrating with tools outside of just selling channels or shipping. So at this point, we have a lot of merchants that, for example, may plug us into, their accounting platform to keep all of this data syncing around. Obviously not so much for Amazon, but for multi-channel merchants, they may rely on ShipStation to handle all of their customer communications. We integrate with tools like MailChimp and things like that. Big step forward for us was definitely when we invested heavily in the actual customer communication piece. Hey, your email is shipped, here's your tracking number. Again, I know 2020, that probably sounds like a given, but we were among the first to make that a really branded, consistent experience that helped drive repeat sales for merchants that were selling direct off of the marketplaces. So I would say those are kind of the big inflection points. And then obviously, since I've been around as well, we've evolved to help merchants in the European and Australian markets as well. So totally different ball game over there. Very similar challenges, but every locality comes with its own challenges and things to learn. So that's been especially interesting as well.
So let's talk about international. So right now is a weird time to be in international shipping. Very challenging, I would venture to guess. It's not one that I would say I'm a pro at. We typically rely upon getting inventory into an FBA center and let them deal with it. And that and customs and taxes, oh, that's a headache. So what's your perspective on international, and how can you help people with that?
Yeah, sure. So I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I will say that we have a lot of merchants that may have just avoided it altogether. They think it's just this impossible thing to surmount. They're going to stick with domestic. They're not messing with it. We typically educate on that because we can automate, again, not to keep going back to that, but we can automate the customs forms, automatically sign documents, even electronically transmit them when applicable. So what seemed like this just black box of don't know what I don't know, if I'm trying to ship outside of the US, really becomes to the point where an international order processing, that's going to work largely similar to getting an order out that needs to go across town. So again, I would say add maybe 5 minutes of setup on top of the 10 or 15 that you mentioned when you're setting up your account, and you can have 99% of your international geographies covered with the way we have it handled. So interestingly enough, we're not just ingesting addresses, we're actually getting a lot of the order information. So you'll have line items, you'll have weights, you'll have SKUs that all import as well. And so what that means is that we can pull from that information to automatically generate customs forms, to populate your declarations, things along those lines. And so it's not just an address or maybe a customer name for an order from your website. You're getting all of this order information, and then that's all power to further automate and streamline this process.
So I think that the solutions you're offering on international are probably way undertapped, and I bet a lot of people would find value from that. So I wish you the best of luck developing that out and getting more people to sign up for it. It's going to be a challenge, I would guess to say, but very worthwhile. Okay, cool. So you're probably neutral on which carriers to use and stuff like that. I've seen FedEx in the news of late. They're kind of a group of contractors, and that's why Amazon kind of moved away from it. And I'm going to guess you're going to be neutral on this, but you have any opinions on carriers or any insight on what people should ship with?
Yeah, sure. So I do have an opinion there. My opinion is that you should never put all of your eggs in one basket. So that's my recommendation, is that regardless of your preference, everybody's different. We have merchants that may have long-standing relationships with one carrier or another. But I would say the biggest mistake that I see merchants doing is just, hey, they started out shipping with provider X or provider Y, and they never thought about it again, or they never went back and negotiated rates, or they just ship it all that way because it's easy. The merchants I see really having the most success on this front are the merchants that may do something as simple as saying, hey, if a customer requests or pays for expedited shipping, I want that to automatically go with this service. So maybe the more commonplace version of that may be, hey, all of my lightweight orders, I know I can ship those out USPS at a really low price point. And then once I start to hit 3 pounds, maybe it makes sense for me to look at FedEx or UPS. So twofold. I would say, never just trust one provider with all of your business. Most have their own little area of expertise. But with tools like this, it's not any longer that you have to jump back and forth between, UPS World Ship and USPS Click and Ship, or going to the post office versus going to FedEx Ship Manager. You can have all of them in one easy to use place. You don't have to remember where the different things are in every different provider. It works the exact same way. You could, with one click, essentially hit select all, print out 500 labels that were, 200 UPS, 200 FedEx, and 100 USPS if you wanted to. That's where I see the merchants that really kind of have it down pat. They use a tool like ours to start to do their homework, start to see where each carrier is going to be best for them, and then they just build it in where they don't even think about it. They're not looking at order by order, trying to see, okay, who's cheaper here, who's cheaper there. The right thing happens every time, so that it's just set, and it kind of, again, hidden cost, but the extra time that you or your workers are spending on orders, ultimately kind of goes into the bottom line cost of getting that order out the door as well. So cutting down on those two. That being said, there are built-in discounts in ShipStation as well. So the first time you logged in, if you don't have any relationships whatsoever with these carriers, a lot of merchants find it really useful to log in and see, automatic discounts from USPS, UPS that are just there from the second you log in.
So I think the last thread that we just went through, you added a tremendous amount of value to the listeners. I never would have thought about automated rules for which carrier to use under conditions. Did not even cross my mind. So thank you for sharing that, Cody. So since you added so much value on that, I have to ask, do you have any other shipping advice?
Yeah, sure. Great question. I mean, and obviously I know this won't be as Amazon centric, but again, since we are most frequently working with multi-channel merchants who drive sales on Amazon and also have their other channels in place as well, is that we just encourage merchants to think about shipping less as an afterthought or a utility and more of an extension of the user experience. So anyway, Amazon, it's not necessarily going to drive a repeat sale, but for your channels where you do have some exposure to the end customer, we definitely see a correlation between a customer having a good, not necessarily even a quick turnaround, but more a holistic experience to where, they feel good about the delivery process, about the communication, about the time frame, even about the unboxing. I think a lot of people, kind of gloss over that. They just stuff it in a box and get it there. But we typically see the merchants growing the fastest that are thinking about this holistically and invest in it as an extension of the customer experience, not just, okay, I captured the sale, stuff it in the box, and it'll get there when it gets there. So I would say, kind of diversify who you're relying on to get these orders out the door and build things in that can make it a really great experience for your customer without you necessarily having to spend more time per order.
Well, love it. Cody, you've added a lot of value on our podcast today. Last question for you. What's the last good book you've read or are reading, and why should everybody else read it?
Oh man,
put you on the spot.
To hedge my bets here, because if I just gave the one true answer to the book that I just set down, I think I'd probably come across a little scary. I'm reading one called Chaos about the CIA and the Manson saga in the 60s. That's been super interesting. Business-wise, Hard Thing About Hard Things is the one that I just wrapped up, and that was super interesting, especially as you see a business grow and get to be along for the ride. Specifically, kind of the difference between peacetime business and wartime business. These are definitely unprecedented times, so that was insightful for me to hear a little bit more about kind of how to carry yourself and grow a business in crazy times like we find ourselves right now.
I bet those two books have a lot in common with the wartime business and doing your research and tracking things down. So, all right, Cody, thank you for joining us. This is Cody from ShipStation. If you want to sign up for ShipStation, we'll have a link at the top of our podcast links, and you can head over to ShipStation.com. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, this is great, man. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so that's the My Amazon Guy podcast. We hope you subscribe to our channel, and if you're from the ShipStation community watching us today and you're wondering who My Amazon Guy is, we are a 15-person agency out of the Atlanta, Georgia area, one-stop shop for all things Amazon. We can help you with everything from setting up Amazon, Etsy, Walmart, connecting your APIs with ShipStation, SEO, merchandising, PPC and advertising, designs in-house, and everything else you could imagine. So check us out at myamazonguy.com. And subscribe to us for other important information about selling online. My name is Stephen Pope, and I am the founder of My Amazon Guy.